ይስጥልኝ ክቡራን እንግዶቻችን ከኦክላሆማ ሲቲ ኦክላሆማ ዛሬ ትልቅ ዝግጅት ያዘጋጀንላችሁ የኦክላሆማ ሲቲ አምስተኛው ዲስትሪክት ኮንግረስማን ስቲቨን ራስል ኦፊስ እዚህ በኦክላሆማ ከተማ ተጠርተን በአባይ ሚዲያ ስም እሳቸውን ከእናንተ ጋር ለማስተዋወቅ ደስ እያለን እናቀርባችኋለን። Congressman Steve Russell, I would like to personally welcome you to our community and to give the privilege of Abai Media to give you an exclusive interview here. This is the first time an Ethiopian television has had the opportunity to come and introduce ourselves as well as introduce you to our community. So on behalf of Abai Media as well as the entire Ethiopian community, we are very honored and we thank you for meeting us.
Well, thank you.
So before we want to bring our audience here, we're going to give the congressman an opportunity to introduce him to you. He will tell you a background about himself, as well as many other things that he would like to share on behalf of the Oklahoma beautiful community here. First and foremost, Congressman, we again personally big time thank you. It took us a long time to get here to come and meet you personally, and on a short notice, what you and your staff did for us, the kind of hospitality you have provided us is beyond a word that I can describe. I humbly, on behalf of my community, would like to thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Congressman, could you please give us a quick background about yourself?
Well, I grew up in Del City, Oklahoma, and I was a soldier most of my adult life in the infantry and served in many places around the world. I retired back to Oklahoma after my time in the military. I have a wife and 5 children. I've been married 32 years. All of my children are grown. I didn't think I would have a political career, but I'm now running for my 3rd term in Congress. And, I had some events and other things that happened during my military service that connected to a lot of people, and ended up continuing to serve in politics.
That's fantastic to hear, sir. So we understand that you said this is your 3rd term. So so this is the 3rd term that we're finishing up, or
no? I was elected in 2014. Was when I was first elected. I served briefly in the state senate for 4 years, just 1 term, and then I left politics. But 2 years later, decided to run for the congressional seat that was open at that time, and was elected. And been re-elected once, and now I'm running for my 2nd re-election.
That's wonderful to hear, sir. Speaking of election, Congressman Russell, how do you see the 2018 election coming up for you?
Well, right now, I think it looks pretty good. I certainly have a lot of work that I would like to continue to do on behalf of the people of Oklahoma. And so far, the feedback that I'm getting is very, very positive in the district. We have a great staff. We work on a number of issues. We try to assist people in so many ways so that their voice is heard in Washington.
Wonderful. Congressman, you said you served in the armed service. We definitely would like to thank you for your service on behalf of our constituents in the United States Congress. Do you believe America's stature as a leader of the free world is currently being attempted to be tarnished?
Well, obviously, when America's always been a force for good in the world, and hopefully we can maintain that position. And I think any time you have a force for good, you will have forces for evil that try to take a blocking position against that. And we certainly have seen that throughout our history. And it's not an exception even with Ethiopia, the great relationship that Oklahoma has had historically with Ethiopia. The right of self-determination and the tenacious spirit of the Ethiopian people. They've managed to not only keep their heritage, their culture, their language, so many things, but then once again you see outside and bad actors trying to interfere with that. And so it's important that the United States try to assist people to remain self-determined and we certainly want to continue to try to do that in many places around the world.
That's fantastic, sir. I like what you mentioned as far as all the Ethiopian Oklahomans we have here. The congressman knows the history of the Ethiopian relationship, especially with this beautiful state of ours. You said Ethiopia has a long-standing relationship with the U.S., especially with Oklahoma. In fact, Emperor Haile Selassie sent an official invitation to President Henry G. Bennett to visit Ethiopia back in 1952. And afterwards, that's when the foreign exchange student program began with the Sooners as well as the Cowboys, OSU and OU. How does democracy and freedom of expression play a role in democratic nations' fundamental rights? Of what role do you think a democracy, rule of law, and freedom of expression play in a society, in Ethiopian society? And this action was taken due to the public outcry demand for justice, basic human rights, and respect for the rule of law. As far as the state of emergency declared sometime in the mid-February by the Ethiopian government. This state of emergency was declared to curb nearly all the fundamental and basic rights of its citizens. How do you feel about the state of emergency declared by the government?
Well, I think it's sad when we see people take advantage of self-determination of any groups in a political party or any groups where we see where they're trying to elect their own government. We all basically, as human beings, want right of self-determination. We're willing to give powers to the government that is over us, but at the same time, those powers, like here in the United States, are derived from the consent of the people. We don't try to elect leaders to become lords over us for life. And when we see people that want to abuse power or hang on to it simply for power's sake, then we're all concerned. I know, in fact, in recent weeks, a congressional delegation wanted to come on a visit to Ethiopia so that we could strengthen the ties between the United States and the Ethiopian people, concerns about some of these basic rights of self-determination. And during the planning of the trip and within days of them getting ready to come, there was this crackdown. And it caused our national leaders to forfeit coming to Ethiopia. It's very sad. It's sad for the Ethiopian people. But that doesn't mean that we haven't taken notice. Anytime we see that people want to exert influence and power over an entire population in a country for their own purposes, then we have to ask ourselves in the United States, well, what is our role with that government? Is this government one that we need to continue to work with? Is this a government that is going to stand for basic human rights, for free elections, for respect of all people groups within that particular country? These are all things that I think the United States stands for. So those are the questions that we're going to be asking now with this new government clampdown. Okay, how temporary is this? With the aid that we provide, with the things that we do, maybe do we need to re-examine that? Why would we want to promote those that are not allowing proper voice of their own citizens? And so we want to do the things that would actually allow Ethiopian citizens to have a voice, and that's why I'm happy to conduct this interview today.
That's fantastic, sir. Thank you so much. So to touch base again on that, the current ambassador to Ethiopia has condemned the current state of emergency in the strongest term yet. The Honorable Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has also echoed the ambassadors. The ambassadors call for more political space, not less. Do you believe holding the regime accountable through H.R. 128 is it a proper signal to send to the dictatorial regime in Ethiopia?
Well, I think it is in terms that when the United States House of Representatives has exerted a position in the past, people can say, well, that's just a resolution and they're making speeches on the floor. Oh, not so. We hold the power of the purse. We hold the power of how foreign aid is applied. We hold the power of being able to promote goodwill or withhold goodwill based upon who is acting favorably and examining a human rights record. When it comes to trade, the United States also still takes very seriously things like most favored nation trade status. And so there's a lot of things that we want to do. And I'm hopeful that the government leaders in Ethiopia, as they're trying to scramble and figure out how they maintain power or peace or whatever it might be, that they take these things in view. Because ultimately what will happen, and we've certainly seen it in the past, when people want to become dictatorial and they seize power on a permanent basis, it really never ends up well for those types of regimes. They always end up in a very bad spot, and it usually is with the destruction of that government and with a lot of pain and suffering of citizens and even nations around them. And I don't think that that's the direction that we want to see Ethiopia or anybody go.
That's fantastic. Congressman, many Ethiopians believe the United States government is indirectly enabling the Ethiopian despotic regime. The killings of innocent Ethiopians continue daily. Do you think you have a historic responsibility to stand by the peace-loving citizens of Ethiopia?
Well, we've had a great relationship with Ethiopia in the past. In fact, the United States was very vocal on issues even during the regimes of dictators in the 1930s, when we saw Haile Selassie pleading to the world in the League of Nations, saying, please help us in our self-determination. And the world was silent then. And despite the valor and the great stand that Ethiopians took against interventions of Mussolini and dictators, it was the United States that, after we had defeated Mussolini and after we had defeated these types of things, the United States was right there to help Ethiopia pick the pieces up again. And Oklahoma has had no small part in that. The agricultural university establishments that we had, a great enterprise for decades in the nation of Ethiopia, has allowed not only people to be able to produce more food and have a better economy, but it did more than that. It forged a deep friendship between the Ethiopian people and the Oklahoman citizens that were involved. In fact, Oklahomans lived for years working and living and teaching in Ethiopia, and we saw the benefits of all of that. So, this isn't academic for us either here. We know who the Ethiopian people are. We know the great history that they have, and we are saddened when we see people try to destroy that or harm that.
Thank you kindly, sir. We understand America's national security trumps all others in foreign relations. However, do you believe dealing with despotic regimes like in Ethiopia is a good long-term approach? Mr. Donald Yamamoto, Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, has also raised the pressure on the Ethiopian regime. He is intimately familiar with the regime since he was an ambassador there for quite a few years. Is it time for Congress to join the chorus of calls to stop the minority rule in Ethiopia?
Well, I think we recognize the right of sovereign states to choose their own government. I mean, the United States has always been respectful of that. However, it doesn't mean we have to endorse bad behavior. We don't have to underwrite bad behavior with bad governments making bad choices. In some administrations or in some years past, maybe we've seen a toleration of this, but in the current administration, it's a new day. Our foreign policy has gotten on a much more positive footing. And so I think the lesson on this is, if you're a dictatorial government harming your own people, take notice, because if you don't, we are.
That's a great point, sir. I think you said it best. Take notice, because we are. Very wonderful. I am sure that you are privy to classified information about Ethiopia. Ethiopians believe the main terrorist in Ethiopia is the regime in power. Ethiopians also believe it is in the regime's best interest that Al-Shabaab, which is the Somalian radicals, thrives in the area so they remain significant to the West. What do you say to those Ethiopians that believe the current regime is using Somalia, or I'm sorry, Al-Shabaab, as a tool to stay in power or to remain their relationship with the West?
It is a future that has no path, but a dead end. Al-Shabaab are barbarians. They don't respect anybody's values or human rights, regardless of race or religion. Al-Shabaab are barbarians. They commit such evil acts, clearly recognized by the world, and we will continue to stand against evil as we do today and as we will do in the future. And so to those Ethiopians that are taking a stand and fighting these issues, take heart. We will stand against all of these acts of terror and these terror groups that operate across borders and in ungoverned spaces as they go out. It's very, very important that we all stand united against this type of evil. And Al-Shabaab is one of the faces of evil.
Thank you kindly, sir. To go back on the aid issue that you brought up, Congressman, the U.S. gives roughly around $1 billion annually to the Ethiopian government. We asked you earlier, do you think it's appropriate to use that as a tax money? What can Americans or the U.S. Congress, what can they do, or what can they propose so that the Ethiopian government gets the message? What do you believe?
Well, I go back to my earlier statement. Take notice, because we are. And this is a new day in American foreign policy, as many have seen in the last year. We are watching. We are returning to many of the core values that America has always been respected and known for. And so, my encouragement to the current regime in Ethiopia is, look, you know what's right to do, and good behavior will always be met with goodwill. But bad behavior does not need to be rewarded. And we certainly want to look at that. And Congress has that power. So the House of Representatives, in our statements, we have the power to determine whether or not that type of aid goes forward or not. We don't want to see the Ethiopian people suffer, but at the same time putting it in the hands of regimes that do not have the best interest in heart, or maybe are harboring groups that conduct terrorism or whatever it might be. Well, guess what? They're not using the money for good purposes to begin with. I don't know where we're at with this current regime, but I go back to my statements. Take notice. We are.
Well said, sir. This is going to be our final question for you. For many Ethiopians living in Oklahoma, this is a big deal for us. So the key word here is HR 128, Congressman. Have you had a chance to glance at the resolution written by Congressman Chris Smith of New Jersey? And what message do you have to our local community here in Oklahoma? Directly, what I would like to ask is, Congressman, will you co-sponsor HR 128, and do you support it?
Well, I do support it. The language in there speaks to many of the things that we've talked about in this interview. And I think you'll see scores of members of Congress that will be supportive and are already supportive of this issue. Again, we don't want to necessarily be disrespectful of the sovereignty of other states that are in the world, but at the same time, we're not going to tolerate where all of the rules and all of the game has somehow changed and they expect the relationship to remain. That relationship is contingent upon self-determination, human rights, goodwill, good behavior. The United States will continue to be a force for good, and we will hopefully continue to be a force against evil.
Wonderful, Congressman. Again, we really want to thank you for the short notice for you to take us at your office here in Oklahoma City. And just to remind our audience again, our Congressman Steve Russell did say that he will support HR 128, and he understands the issue of what's going on in Ethiopia, as well as respecting Ethiopian sovereignty. Congressman, it's been a real pleasure. I thank you, and I look forward to coming back in here and doing our interview after you won your election in 2018.
Well, we've got a lot of work to do, on the federal side, and we certainly want to be supportive of the plight of Ethiopians everywhere, and we certainly love the diaspora that is here, that live and work, and our friends in our own community. I'm grateful that we have Oklahomans that fully are integrated and understand this issue, and it is important that we don't forget those that are there on the continent in Africa.
Wonderful. So I apologize again. I did say that was the last question, but we just received an Oklahoman letter or a question. We have an Ethiopian American community that mainly congregates in local churches and would like to work with you closely. Can you give us an idea how that can be achieved and effective?
Well, my staff, we certainly look at a lot of national security issues, and we look at a lot of foreign policy issues. And one of the things that we are expanding our work in is religious persecution and human rights violations in foreign countries, and how we might be able to draw attention and aid those groups that suffer. And so that is something that we will be giving more attention to in the short term.
ክብር እንግዶቻችን በአባይ ሚዲያ ስም ከኦክላሆማ ሲቲ ኦክላሆማ የኦነረብል ኮንግረስመን ስቲቨን ራስል ኦፊስ መተን ላስተላለፍነው ዝግጅት አብራችሁን ስለተሳተፋችሁ በክብር እናመሰግናችኋለን እና ደግሞ ኮንግረስማኑም እንደሰማችሁት የሚቀጥለው ጊዜ ላይ እንግዲህ ከ2018 ኢሌክሽን በኋላ እንደገና መተን የኮንግረስመን ስቲቨን ራስል ለእናንተ እናቀርብና ለእናንተ እንደገና ደስ ብሎን ኢንትሮዱስ እናደርጋለን። ከልባችን በጣም እያመሰግናችሁ እንደገና እስከምንገናኝ መልካም ምሽት።